Introducing Marty Park. Marty Park has been an entrepreneur since he was the age of 21. And as I understood from some people who knew Marty in his elementary and junior high, he might have been an entrepreneur way back then. One of his companies, Evolve Business Groups, focuses on strategic coaching for entrepreneurs and training for their teams. Through Evolve, he has intimately worked with close to 400 companies. That's impressive. Several of those have been financial service spaces, from national brands to single operator advisors. Talking with Marty on the phone, he is about growth in your performance of your business. And most importantly, people, the thing we are about. Let's give a nice round of applause to Marty and your wonderful talk, the key success tool for your business.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm really glad to be here and to wind things up. I know you've only had a number of days, so there's only 1 hour left. So look alive, people, look alive. Okay. James touches on the fact that, as a young guy at the age of 21, I started my first company, a software company. Much to my parents' chagrin, going into my 4th year of the commerce program, I said, I'm dropping out of school, but it's okay because by the time everybody else graduates, I'll be retired. As you can imagine, that didn't quite go that way. About a year later, I hadn't paid myself, had racked up the credit cards, and had to say to my business partners, Dad, is there any chance we could put a second mortgage on your house? So the reality of that story is, a little bumpier, like anybody who's in business knows that it looks really, really good on the surface, but oftentimes the deeper story has all sorts of bumps and rides like a roller coaster. Over the years now, I've had 13 companies in 6 different industries. I am somebody who oftentimes through my career, somebody has said, hey, what do you think of this business? And I've just gone, yeah, that sounds like fun. There's not been a lot of strategy to the way I've gotten into companies, often more strategy getting out of them. But it's given me a diversity and an experience that most people don't have. I've been really fortunate to win some awards, whether it be local, like in Calgary. I had an opportunity for 3 years in a row to represent Canada at the G20 summits, where we were advising G20 leaders on entrepreneurship and how to foster entrepreneurship internationally, because they recognize that the engine for the economies of the world are not giant conglomerates, but are in fact entrepreneurs and small business. And the thing I've discovered that I absolutely love is just the game of business, the mechanics of it. And I traditionally, when I got into coaching and a lot of training work, I was all about the mechanics. I was about tactics and strategy and, which do you do first and logistics. And what I've discovered is that, tying in with this talk today, that some of the softer skills and the people skills are absolutely foundational and much more effective when you tie those together with some of those tactical things. So I want to ask the question, when I use the word authenticity, or I say authentic, who comes to mind for you? Who do you think of? Do you think of somebody famous like an Oprah? Where I think even if we had lunch with Oprah or hung out with Oprah, we'd find she's kind of the same way she is on TV. Would it be somebody where, even after a whole career and lifetime of success, that they're still got the same humbleness, still seem to be the average Canadian guy? Or would it be somebody closer to home? Is it somebody you could think of in your family, like a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or somebody, a brother, sister, where you just go, they're just so them. I mean, you can't, everything they do just screams the way they should be doing it. I'm a big believer that every one of us has an inner you that is 100% authentic. And when you are able to tap into that in your business, in the way you sell, the way you lead, the way you promote, the way you do all those different components of a functional business, that you are way, way more successful. And I've seen it, and I'm going to try to present some exact cases and stories today that you can take back and use as examples and how you do that in your business. Now, I should say, all of us get started, right? I don't know when you started in your career, if you were got your first job at 16, 17, 18, 25. But even step back and think about how you got into that and where you were like, I know nothing. In fact, at that age, you probably thought you knew everything. So maybe when you started as a financial advisor, you can say, well, the first day I recognized I didn't know much. And so oftentimes what happens is you get into a dealer or you get into an office and they team you up and they say, well, you know, Charles knows what he's doing, or talk to Doug because Doug knows, or Ann, I mean, you should really talk to her. And they set you up with somebody who you can start to use as a role model, somebody you can start to emulate. Maybe you're lucky enough to get a Mr. Miyagi where everything he tells you is absolutely right if you need to learn to wax a car or sand a floor. But what I found is that the reason we start to emulate somebody else is because it's so complex getting into your business that inevitably it's faster for you to be able to pursue somebody else's method and copy what they're doing. But there becomes a point in your career where by just copying the methodologies of other people, that it in fact starts to hurt your performance. Going from 0 to that first level of competence, you can copy somebody else and follow those role models. But to excel beyond that, one of the things you have to do is find your own authenticity. Because otherwise what happens is your performance starts to be a bit of a shadow of what it could be if you solely operated in the way you talk, sell, present, service clients, learn, all of those things. When you do it yourself, you're able to come through 100%. If not, you end up operating in sort of a shadow of what your business and your performance can be. My experience is that more and more in business, and more when you talk about things like social media where people can put up a different face, more and more where you're bombarded with all sorts of marketing, there's just so many more ways for your business to show up that, and as the industry becomes more and more competitive, I think the average person knows more and more people who are in insurance or call themselves a financial advisor, that your authenticity helps to separate you in sales, in the way, if you've got a small team or a large team, the way you lead those people, and certainly from the perspective of your customers. Because I can tell you, maybe not everybody in this room, but some of you in this room have had experiences where your customers have come in and met with you, have heard you talk, heard you give ideas, recommend a product, and have walked away and gotten in their car and gone, yeah, I don't know, I just don't feel very good about that. The reason they say things like that is because all of our customers, all of our employees, all of the people we work with, everybody, our prospects, all of us have that innate human spidey sense, right? There's just sometimes you're watching somebody walk through their pitch or recommend a product or tell you that this is the amount of insurance you should carry, and something telling you that, I don't know, this just doesn't feel right. It's not intellectual. It's absolutely one of those feeling moments. And so authenticity is the only thing that overcomes that. And when somebody's able to find that and be able to not have to worry about combating the people you're dealing with, their spidey sense, it has a profound effect on your results. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Now, some of you may work with this guy, but I love this picture because, you know, if this guy came in to talk to me about insurance needs or my portfolio or the returns I could be getting, it really wouldn't matter if he had the best product in the world. If he said, listen, I've got an investment portfolio that's turning 18% a year annually, I mean, you can't find a better, I mean, of course, then I'd think Ponzi scheme. But if he said that, I would think, geez, this sounds incredible. But at the same time, I think it doesn't sound incredible because all of the messages that he conveys are inappropriate and inconsistent. And I say this because the way you dress in your business, how you do your hair, the energy level you come in at, the words you use, the message that you provide, the materials you have, even the way you manage your schedule, everything states how you perform in your business and in your life. I say that because from an authentic perspective, I played around with what I like to dress in. I don't wear ties. I just don't like them. And so I thought, why do I wear a tie if it doesn't really feel authentic? I'm really big on striped socks, but I'm not big on picture socks. I'm really clear that when I am in front of clients, when I'm in front of prospects, and certainly when I'm presenting to you, that the energy I put forward has to be a little bit higher, right? It's not the same Friday night when I'm sitting on the couch. It's absolutely, I show up recognizing that my business is a bit of a performance. And so my energy level is authentic for the setting. The words I use are not some copied script, not something where I go, well, they told me to say it like this. I find the way that it's comfortable for me saying it where I really believe it. I look at materials. Quality is a huge value for me. So everything from the thickness of my business card to the materials we use to if we send a gift, It's not just, some random thing. Last week we got a referral from somebody. We found out through people in his office that he really needed golf shoes. We found out which shoe size he was and what brands he liked, and went and got him a pair of golf shoes and presented it to him. Only because recognizing the quality of that action had a dramatically more impacting effect on him and really felt authentic. There's a real emphasis when we talk about business in the end result. What are we going to have? And you guys have been through this where oftentimes when you talk about goal setting or planning, that there's always like, what's the end result you want? What do you want in terms of assets under management? What's the dollar value of the policies you want to write? What do you want to have for you? What do you want to make as an income? And we always talk about that end result. And then what we do is we work it back to say, okay, well, what are you going to do? And from a management perspective, there's often just the math of sales where it's like, okay, well, you'd have to get in front of this many people. You'd have to sell this many people with an average portfolio size of this. And business is so focused on the doing piece, right? That element of if you want to have more or a better result or have a bigger business, that you just simply need to be doing more. This is Dustin Hoffman as Willie Lomax in Death of a Salesman. If anybody's ever familiar with the movie, obviously a play version. My favorite piece about this is that Willie Lomax, as a salesman, but really the story is not just about him as a salesman, it's about his life. He could do 1,000 times more activity in his job as sales or the same approach. That same approach of slumped over shoulders and sort of low energy, dragging his feet to meetings, and it wouldn't matter because his issue is an internal issue. It's how he shows up for his whole life. It's how he shows up for his job. And so I go back to this formula and say the real emphasis that people need to be addressing is this element of be, of who you are, because that's where authenticity sits. It's also where ideas and the thoughts start, because more and more, as I mentioned, I started worrying about tactics and strategies and logistics when I got into guiding people in business. And more I've discovered that that is all useless if the thoughts and the identity and the authenticity isn't there first. If you look at this as a math equation, it's fairly clear too that if either the be or the do is a 0, that the end result is a 0 as well. And so often I get people who say, well, I'm doing so much, I'm doing just what my dealer told me, I'm doing all of this, I'm doing, and it's just not working. And so that's why I thought that this element of talking about authenticity becomes so critical. So I'd ask you, are you prepared to make a bit of a commitment to your own authenticity or a commitment to a better performance out of yourself just by being a little bit more aware of how you show up every day in your business? Are you? Okay, at least 6 of you. That's fantastic. I say it's really interesting because when people do show up and figure out a methodology in their business end to end, from the first day they meet people to they become a client to the long-term relationship they build with people, when you show up like that and you're authentic, it's great because you know what? Most people are afraid to do that. Most people are afraid to leave the anchor of, well, I know this brochure or I know this presentation or I better just stick with what's safe. So you stand out when you find that sort of authenticity. And it comes back to this idea. You say to people, well, belief-wise, do you believe you can do it or believe you can't do it? Now, when I start to talk to people about this and then transition to, let's talk about authentically what a meeting would go like. How would you treat your customers? Right? Would you hug them? Would you handshake them? What's natural for you? That people start to say, well, yeah, but I shouldn't, or I should, or I can't. And we set all sorts of limitations on how we change our business up and, in fact, move away from or short-circuit our own success in the way we move to authenticity. And I'll talk again with some examples about what I mean specifically. But my advice there is get out of your own way. If you continue to do business the same way you've done up until this point of the year for the balance of 2018, you will get the same result. And oftentimes, because I'm big on laziness, instead of doing more stuff, let's look at what you could do that would just change up your results from how you're showing up. I met a young guy. We were doing some sales training up in northern Alberta, and met a sales guy. And I said to him, one of the key things for me when I meet people is tell me your story, because I find as soon as you get really good or able to tell an honest story about how you got into financial advising, what drove you to it, why it's a passion for you, or what pieces you like, that people really make connection there. And so I was talking to this young guy and I said, so listen, you're selling houses. What were you doing before? Well, I was playing a little bit of hockey. Oh, well, what kind of hockey? Well, I was, just, a little bit of pro hockey. I was like, pro hockey? Well, tell me about that. For what team? Oh, well, I played a little bit for the Bruins and the Penguins. I was like, sorry, you mean the Boston Bruins? The Pittsburgh Penguins? Well, yeah. It's not making sense to me yet. I was like, sorry, and what's the problem with that? He goes, well, I only played with them for 13 games. I was like, okay, but before that, where did you play? Oh, I was in Europe for a little while playing. I was like, okay, and sorry, again, why aren't you more excited about this? You are Canadian, right? And he said, well, it's just that, my dad had a long career in the NHL, and so did my uncle. You're from a family of hockey players. Well, yeah. I was like, okay, let me get this straight. You're from Canada, you're familiar with hockey and Tim Hortons and all of this, and you tell me that you've played in the NHL, the highest level in the world. Did you win a ring? Maybe you left that out. He's like, no, I didn't get a ring. I was like, okay, but my uncle has one. I'm like, okay. So I go through, and you're from a family. And okay, so let's leave the hockey for a minute. How did you get into home building? Well, because my uncle's one of the owners. And when he talked about the impact on people of like the biggest asset purchase of their life, and that day that they build the house and you hand them the keys, he's like, I just love it. I just love the day that people take possession, and it's so rewarding. I was like, do you tell anybody this story? He's like, well, no, I tell people that I used to play hockey and I like selling houses. I was like, all right. So we went over this principle of just embrace your story, because I helped him reframe the fact that what he was perceiving as a complete failure of his hockey career was, in fact, even if he only played 13 games, was that not a milestone? Did that not prove that league after league, from bantam to midget to junior all the way through, that he could perform and he could do it? And that now he's taken all those skills about teamwork and hard work and trust and effort, and he's now channeling that into home sales. And the reason he got into home sales is because it's family again, and the actual sale, what he's producing and providing for people, resonates with him. Well, I got to tell you, the number of sales, he went from being the bottom salesperson out of the 8 in the company to number 2 within 2.5 months. He phoned, and it was like a different person 2 months ago, and he was so suddenly confident. I'm on fire. I was like, what are you doing differently? He's like, I'm just telling people my story and making a connection, and after that, they don't even go looking anywhere else. They just start asking me what we can build. What do we have for bungalows and 2 stories? I was like, wow, interesting. All he did was find a story that resonated, both with him and with other people, and he finally embraced that story. And I will tell you, although he thought that only playing 13 games wasn't much, that people will pick authentic over you being number 1 for 5 years in a row, or top of table or something like that, and an award. They will pick your authentic story time and time again. From a marketing standpoint, is everybody familiar with Avis rental cars? Yeah. Anybody know what the famous Avis was? We try harder, right? Avis was number 2 in the marketplace. They didn't go in with a marketing slogan, we're number 2. Thank God. But they went in with this idea of we try harder, right? The recognition that we're not perfect and we're not the biggest guys there, but we'll do more for you. We'll try harder. Their annual sales were growing at about 10%, and when they launched this campaign, it grew to 35% a year they were growing by. They immediately started to grow at such a rate and take over market share, and it was dramatic. But I love that example, because even 40 years later, it is one of the best examples of authenticity and how authentic message really, really changed the results. I will tell you that a lot of the things that Kat said, I was just sitting on the side, and there's so many things around social media and marketing that absolutely resonated with me that I wanted to be like, yes, exactly, what she said. And I'll give you an example. So Instagram is a platform that we've been encouraged in our business to do more of. And I got really frustrated a few weeks ago because I said, listen, I'm on Instagram and I'm watching this and I'm watching people that follow the hashtag entrepreneur and that are sort of in my space, and there's just a lot of phony on there. And they said, what do you mean? I said, there's people that are, every picture is them leaning against the Learjet, leaning against the Lamborghini. As you know, that's what business ownership is like, right? And I said, right. And I said, it drives me nuts that this is the way you portray the entrepreneur life. And so, but in that, good for the consultant or the person working with us, because he said, well, okay, but if you recognize all that inauthenticity, can you be the authentic voice, and what would that look like? And then we started saying, oh, well, what would our content say? Oh, yeah, well, what could we do in terms of messaging, and what would that look like? So my point is that in the marketing, whether it's in social media, online, any of those things, your website, authenticity and people being able to say, oh, I don't want to put my picture up, and oh, I won't say too much, I'll just put some generic vision statement. Telling your story, putting your picture up, being big and smiley, showing your team, it has a dramatic effect because people see that, and we want to deal with people where it's real. There's a guy who's a personal trainer who I've seen his videos, and he literally sort of hunches over, like elbow down, talking to the camera. Yeah, hey, it's Doug here, so, I'm just... And I said to my wife, this guy has 200,000 followers. Who would want this guy as a personal trainer? He looks like he's ready to doze off. It's always unscripted. But my wife said, yeah, but he's real. I said, yeah, but who wants to work out with a personal trainer like that? She's like, well, you might not, but he's got 200,000 followers, so somebody must like him. Can't argue the math. So I say that because as soon as you become authentic, and with clients, we push them to be able to say, hey, do some video, but more, and the trend in video is more and more to be unscripted, to be doing it on a phone and say, hey, I'm just walking and I had this idea. It's no longer the sound stage, the mic, all of those things, right? Because people are tired of that. They want to be able to say, like, okay, I like this person, and as she was saying in social media, if you don't know, say you don't know. If you've got an idea, point them to it. Give them resources. Be a source of education. Be a supporter of theirs. Hey, you can do this. This is great. People love that. It's the authenticity of all of that marketing that really, really shines through and will move you in social media circles, causes people to refer you or to be able to link you to something else or to share what you're putting out. I always love the idea that it's not always about how smart you are or your ability, but even if you take one of those, as she said, don't just share the same article. You take the same article, but then you put your thoughts on it. And because those are real and authentic and honest, people respond to that stuff. And all of a sudden, the same marketing everybody else is doing, yours starts to resonate and rise above it. People have said to me, well, okay, how do you find this idea of authenticity? Like, I've been doing it the way they told me to do it back at the office for 15 years now. I mean, that sort of feels the way it is. And I say that finding authenticity is a little bit like going to an art gallery, right? You go, you stand in front of a painting, and you think, yeah, I don't really like that one. And you go to the next one. This is better, but I like the color, but I don't like that. Until eventually you start to go, oh, I get a style that I like. And I think it's the exact same thing when you start to recognize, well, what are the interests I have in the business? I mean, maybe you happen to love CI and DI, but you don't like doing group benefits. And you start to recognize, like, well, I have a personal interest in even the products I can potentially use and what that might look like. The ability to be able to say, okay, from a style perspective, like, do I want clients who are, I don't know, not only high net worth maybe, but that are casual and relaxed people? What do I want in my office? I know a lawyer, and in her law firm, the color throughout their office is lime green. And it is bright and fresh. And when I first walked in, I was like, are you guys serious at a law firm? She said, what makes you say that? I said, it's just so bright and designed and warm, and it's not like a law office at all. She goes, it's funny, everybody says that, but I knew that I wanted, coming from one of those big firms, I didn't want my firm to feel that way. So the style of everything, down to our office, to our marketing materials, really represents us. The idea of message, I've been through lots of those things where it's like, read the script, memorize the script. And I love that even if I talk to people about we have a gentleman on our team who does telesales work, so he's actively reaching people. We always give him the bullet points and then say, now put it in your words. And I like that idea that then it becomes an authentic, effective message. I mentioned that idea of products. if there's a product you don't like selling and one you really do like selling, then focus on that. Because although somebody says, yeah, but this one pays a lot more, that's never going to be the thing that wins people over or amounts to your success, right? It's one of those things that you get out of bed and you go, I just love talking about this product. I could talk about it all day long. And then the last thing is that ideal client. I love the idea that ideal clients are different for everybody. And I'll talk more about that. But when you're able to put together all of those things and try different things on in all of those areas, you start to be like, oh, I've got a really clear understanding of how, even within an office, how the way I want to do business is just a little bit different than Chuck down the hall. The other thing that this leads to is that when I get people who start to be like clear on their story, like the sales guy in Northern Alberta, that people become willing to share. When you get clear on your goals, the vision for your business, your story, the products you love, why you love them, the results you get, you now are so effective at sharing that. Your confidence level and willingness to be able to start a conversation with, let me go first, let me tell you about me. Or I'm just so excited about what we're doing back at the office, I want to share this. It's profound. And the other thing I love about it is when you get really comfortable sharing that authenticness, customers do the same thing. Because there's some natural psychology to when I share my story with you and then I say, well, what about you? That you, A, feel a bigger, higher level of trust, and so you're more willing to share. But there's also a little obligation. Well, now I've told you all about me. What about you? And I got to tell you, that is dramatically different than the method I've seen with a large company nationally, where the first thing they talk about is, well, go through the sheet. So what's the value of your home? Great. What do you have in investable assets today? What do you have? And it's like, it feels a little bit like going to the doctor's office where they say, just drop your pants. Aren't we going to dance or shake hands or hug? Just drop your pants, Mr. Parker. Right. But I think that your willingness to share has such a dramatic effect, both with customers, because if they don't have that high trust level, it's why customers leave. I don't know, they're moving their assets. It just caught me out of the blue. Should never catch you out of the blue. I want to talk about a specific financial advisor that we've done some work with. Last year, in 2017, he moved $12 million of assets. So he had new assets under management of $12 million for the year. Not bad, into his portfolio. And so, but we met, he and I started working together in January. And I said to him, what do you want to do? What are your goals? And then we started talking about, he said, I've got this database of all these people. I've been in this business 17 years. It's not my first day. He said, so I've been to different places. Even from my previous career, like I have a serious network and database of people. I was like, okay. But he said, but I meet with them and I just feel like that the Herb Tarlick. I feel like the used car salesman. I mean, I get in like pitch them. So I said, okay, well, so the way we're doing this doesn't feel very authentic. He's like, no, I just feel like a bit of a schmuck. I said, okay, well, let's take it away. I said, you know these people, so you have some relationship with them. So if you email them or phone them, they'd know who you were. It's not like you're strangers. He's like, right. I said, well, being that you have a relationship, if they were just friends and you hadn't seen them in a while, what would you do? He's like, I'd want to grab dinner with them or I'd take them for lunch. I was like, well, why don't we start there? He's like, what do you mean? I said, well, in our new process, why don't we just start inviting these people to lunch? And I said, now, what the people he's targeting are multi-million dollars in terms of investable assets. So I said, I don't think we're taking them to Subway. Let's take them to a lunch where they really appreciate the food, the wine, the atmosphere. Let's make it a bit of an experience where, if nothing else, they say, that was great. It was great to go for lunch. And so we set that up. We picked a restaurant. They put the credit card on file so the bill never came. It was just taken care of. And away they went. And so he started and he said, well, first lunch. He's like, I got a lunch book tomorrow. What am I going to say? I was like, why don't you start with, hey, what's new with you? What's going on? And just find out all about them. I said, I don't want you to talk about anything for the first 30 minutes but them. Be interested. He was like, okay. So we went for lunch because I knew what would happen. He'd talk about them, what's going on with you, how are the kids, where are you living, what happened, da-da-da, get the lowdown on their whole life. And then at some point, there's always that magical switch. Well, enough about me. Brad, what about you? What are you doing these days? And this is the part that he was great at. He is such a fan and advocate and so thrilled about the firm he's building, his team, the way they're managing money, some of the products. He just becomes alive. He's infectious. And so that's what he did. I said, don't sell him anything. You're not there to sell anything. I don't want you to talk about a product. I don't want you to do any of that. You're just having lunch. He's like, okay, got it. That actually, I feel better. It relieves me to know that. So he would tell him, well, we're doing this. We've got this team, blah, blah. And just as lunch was ending, he would say, hey, let me invite you. If you ever do want to talk about financial planning or your money or anything like that, I'm glad to set up a meeting and we can go to my office and we can always have that conversation. But only if you want to. Really unassuming, an invitation, not a sales pitch. Well, all of a sudden, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 4 people, 4 out of 5, 6 out of 8 are all saying, yeah, well, can we have that second meeting? I'd like to talk to you about that. And he said, we then said, well, okay, well, that's different. We've had lunch, we've caught up, we've been authentic about that. Now, when we move to the office, it's a different game. We are going to have our formal presentation, and we will walk through that story and that pitch. We will go through, and at that point, we're going to walk through and we're going to have some recommendations. We're going to ask them some pre-questions. We're also going to find out what they drink to make sure that's available, right? If we can find out from somebody they work with, their spouse, how they take their coffee at Starbucks, we're going to have that available at the start of the meeting, just as a little extra thing. So I say this because it started to work, and Brad started to have lunches with people and started to be able to then book meetings. In the first 6 months of this year, he put $28 million under management. In the first 6 months. At this point now in the year, he's at 40. And most recently, I said to him, where do you think you could go? He said, I can do $100 million in a year. I'm sure of it now. I said, you're a little different than the guy 6 months ago. Same list, same activity level. He's not doing more people. But his belief in his process and his authenticity is so different. And he said, I'm just jazzed. And he said, it's so weird. People really want to work with me. Well, here's a tip. People are desperate to work with a financial advisor who will give them good advice and create relationship with them and be authentic with them. All of them. I say this because I have a ton of business owner clients, and all of them, when we talk about their financial planner, I can think of one in the past couple of years who has said, oh no, I love my financial planner. Most of them have said, yeah, well, I got a guy. Okay, a guy. That sounds pretty profound. When you show up authentically, one of the best parts is the fact that you now match a market. One of my little cheats, or one of my little pleasures, is some of those crazy TV shows. One of them is on HBO, and it's called Ballers with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And he's an ex-football player, and he becomes a financial advisor, in fact. And they put together investment packages and programs for ex-football players because his character loses all his money when he finishes playing football in some bad investments. But I bring it up because he recognizes the people he wants to serve are guys just like him. And so he has a direct connection to that marketplace. He's an ex-football player, now a financial advisor working for football players. I say that because often when I talk to somebody about, okay, tell me about who would be a market that you just connect with, people say things like, well, rich people. Right. See, that's the guy. Yeah. Or they say things like, well, people that have at least $500,000 in investable assets. I was like, well, you know what? Let's go out on the street and we'll try and identify those people. Is that one? Oh, that guy had a fast car. I bet he's one. Right? And you recognize, well, that's not very effective and really not a definition for a unique market. So I say, why isn't it something like women over 45 who are now divorced, who are looking for financial independence, but also want a high degree of involvement and participation and guidance from their financial advisor? They're athletic, energetic, lifelong learners, well-connected in a community. That would be a start of a bit of a profile. But I ask you to go back to say, how authentic is your definition of your target market or your authentic market? Because if you're just looking for people with a certain value or number beside their name, it becomes really, really different to identify them, but it becomes really, really difficult for them to identify why you're the right fit. If anybody's ever seen me speak, this is a guy I love to talk about. His name is Paddy Lund, Dr. Paddy Lund. He's a dentist from Australia. And I want to talk about the extremeness of where he's taken his business. Now, how many people here love going to the dentist? Wow, there's usually one. There's always some token crazy person. Maybe it's James. But so Paddy said just like that because nobody likes going to the dentist. And he was brought into the dental. This is the way you do it, right? Somebody comes to get you. Mark, park. And then I realize, oh, they mean me, Marty. Right? And they follow you back. Here's your chair. The dentist comes in. He starts to make small talk. While my mouth is open, I'm back in the chair. Right? I leave swollen. Then they say, how do you want to pay? I'm still busy drooling on myself. I'm like, this is not a good experience. Patty was in that same space and not enjoying being a dentist. In fact, he was hating it. But he had that moment where he was suffering from depression, like so many dentists do. And he said, listen, I'm either getting out of this business or I'm going to change it to make it my own. And he really got focused on, okay, if I was a patient and I was going to the dentist, how would I love it to be? Not how would I like it or what would be a little better. How would I love it? So the experience now at Happiness Dentistry, which is the name of his firm, they have 2 giant gold doors and a little plaque. There's no signage, there's no nothing. The only way you can get in as a client is by referral. The door is in fact locked, you can't walk in. It's by appointment only. But you ring the doorbell. And the first thing that happens is when you become a referred client, you get a little welcome package. And one of the things in it is you get the profile, all about the bio, of your service person, who is going to be your customer service person and your care rep for the entire duration that you're with their dentistry practice. So I go there, ding dong, the door opens, and there's my service rep. Hi, I'm Sherry, you're Marty, come on in. So they don't take me to the big waiting room, they take me to a little private waiting room. On the intake forms, they ask me, what do I like to read? What do I like to drink? The first thing they do is they have a giant espresso machine, old school, with the big arms that come down to press the espresso. Because Patty said, I love the smell of espresso. Dental offices smell terrible, but everybody loves the smell of a coffee shop. And who doesn't want an espresso in the morning? So yeah, we're serving coffee. Other people in the industry said, are you mad? Who would serve coffee at a dental office? Well, as it turned out, people are ordering up espressos 1, 2, and 3 while they're there. And then he thought, you know what else would be fun? I'd love a little treat. So they started making what they call dental buns, little tiny cinnamon buns. So now they say, hey, Marty, would you like an espresso? And I say, oh, I'd love an Americano. Okay. Now, because it's in Australia, they offer tea. They offer 86 types of tea because they don't want you to say, oh, I'd like this one. And they go, oh, yeah, we don't have that one. We've only got 3 types. We've got Earl Grey, mint, the usual. Whenever you go to a restaurant, they've kind of got their top 3 to 5. He's like, no, anything you want, we've got it in stock. It's just a little closet. It doesn't mean a lot in terms of management, but boy, it makes a difference when they hand you a menu with 86 things. You're like, this is the tea? This is unbelievable. So now I'm sitting, and they take me to my little private waiting room. It has magazines and newspapers because they know what I like to read from my intake form. I'm sitting eating a cinnamon bun, which already I can't believe this is the best experience ever, right? I'm drinking a coffee. Patty comes in, says, hey, and instead of talking to you while you're backwards in the chair and your mouth is open, he says, what's new, Marty? How's the family? And he knows a little bit about it because they track all the things going on and they take notes. And so we talk. And then finally he says, any concerns about your teeth? Here's what we're going to do today. How does that sound? Sounds great. And then he has a little slider door and he walks you into a private theater so you don't necessarily see all the other patients. And he closes the door and says, okay, we'll get started. Now, unfortunately, the dental portion, he's still a dentist, right? That's the only part they haven't been able to fix. But he does say things like, they let you know they only use gold because they believe everything that they do is gold. It's the number one material to be able to use in your dental work, so that's the default, that's the quality standard. Anyway, they perform the dental work, they move you back to your little private room. Depending on they walk you to the front door. Sherry would walk me back to the front door. They will do house calls. They make sure that they will have people drive out to see how things are. And at the end of it, they never ask you for payment. They put a credit card on file because they know that when you're already swollen and still enjoying the aftermath of the dentist, that the last thing you want to deal with is the insult now of payment and all of that. They just deal with it later. If there is any problem with your credit card, they'll phone you after a couple tries in a couple days. But they never embarrass you in front of anybody. That's the experience. And Patty, other dentists said, you're going to go broke. Are you a lunatic? People are not going to want to go, I don't know even why you'd waste your time, Patty. Well, miraculously, Patty now has 3 clinics. Patty has a dozen dentists that work for him. There is almost a 15-month waiting list to get in. He makes 3 to 4 times as much money as he ever used to when he was a solo practicing dentist doing it their way. He also travels all around the world. He has a series of books. He does speaking. He has built a little empire just based on the fact that what he calls the happiness-based business or the authentic business, that people everywhere, including a lot of dentists, are like, tell me more about that. How would I do that? And all he really did was listen to that inner voice to say, what would I like? Because let's be honest, who wouldn't like to go to the dentist and have a great coffee, a great cinnamon bun, read a magazine, all as a better opening to things than, Mark Park, you still got my name wrong. I love this idea that authenticity is a bit of a journey. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of inner work. So just like going to the gallery, the same way you've got to stand in front of a painting, whether it's your marketing or a sales script or anything, sometimes you just got to sit with it. Like, I appreciate now when clients go, I just got to see how let me just digest that. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. We have a sales training program that we're moving to online, and I wanted to rebrand it. And so we have a branding guy working with us on all that, and he's given us all these solutions. And every time I've said, they're all good. I mean, up here I get it, but I've got to find the one that resonates with me here. Because when it resonates with me, my ability to perform the material, to write it, to tie it all together is going to be profound. So that name is so important. So if it takes me 2 months to figure it out, that's okay, I'll wait. I'll make up that time as soon as we've found that right thing. The other thing that happens is that as you move through your career, it changes. I know what my focus was and what my key elements were when I was in my 20s. A lot of it was around credibility, right? Because at 23, when I was selling a $100,000 software unit, there was people like, sorry, you have a sales manager, right? It's not just you. I'd of course say, oh yeah, the sales manager back at the office. I mean, I'll have to go talk to him. I'd get back to the office and then phone them. Yeah, no, I talked to him. He's good with it, right? His name happened to also be Marty. But I love this idea that as you move through your career, what's authentic for you now might be different than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and that's okay. So the constant adaptation and innovation in your business should be an ongoing process. I say to clients, there should be one thing every single month that you're innovating or updating in your business. So 12 things. Don't do 50, because then it just becomes scattered. But one innovation per month. So you map those out. And if you maintain that level, 12 things a year, over the course of 2 or 3 years, it's 24, 36, you will be light years ahead of your competitors. Light years ahead of other people, because I'm telling you, people just don't change anything. They get into business for year one with Mr. Miyagi, and then they do it the same way for the next 24 years. That's typically the pattern. I wanted to run through sort of a top 10 list, but I could only think of 5. So we're going to start with top 5 signs that you're not operating authentically. The first one is this idea of it feels a little bit like a rock in your shoe. And what I mean by that is you can still walk around. It's just a little bit of discomfort, right? There's just something that sort of sits with you where you go, I don't know, it's just not feeling right. It just doesn't quite, and there's just a little bit of discomfort. Like you know something's a little off. It's a simple indicator that, okay, because when you're in the groove and when it's authentic, it lights you up and it feels easy. Just like you take the rock out of your shoe and you go, oh, man, that is better. Oh, I could walk a mile now. The second thing is the idea of insomnia of regret. And what I mean by that is everybody's had insomnia from, oh my God, the kid's birthday party's on the weekend. I've got to do this, I've got to do. There's a difference between the to-do list insomnia, where there's just the pressure of all the things you got to remember, and the regret insomnia, where you've had a meeting and you're regretting the way you showed up, or the things you talked about, or the way you said something, or maybe the way you pushed the paperwork, but there's some aspect that when you catch yourself in the wake in the middle of the night thinking about something in business, and it's out of a feeling of regret, it is a sign that there's an authentic issue there. There's an authenticity problem that you're experiencing. I love this one. How did I get here? I think everybody gets to a place where in your career where sometimes you go, I don't know how I got here. Like, 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 years ago, everything seemed to sit pretty well with me. But again, because you change as a human being, your authentic business needs to change as well. If you ever have that moment where you're like, I don't really know. All of a sudden I got to be 53 and I've been doing this business, but it just doesn't sit right anymore. That is, first off, okay. But it is an opportunity for you to say, great, if you're going to be in the business for another 7 years, from 53 to 60, great, change something up, innovate, and become more authentic and do it the way you want, because you've certainly got the track record and the credibility now that you can back it up. So if you start to do business a little more the way you want, it's going to be empowering to you and the people you deal with. This idea that no one has your back, I've seen this from a corporate perspective, that when you get somebody that everybody knows is just a little authentic, that oftentimes those people recognize and they say, well, I don't feel like anybody here has my back. Oftentimes that's just a reflection that other people don't have a high level of trust with you. And they don't trust you because they don't believe that you're being authentic on a day-to-day basis. I think I just dealt with some people yesterday, and one of them said, well, I'm that happy person. I've got to be happy every day in the office. People just expect it. I was like, are you happy every day at the office? Well, I have to be. I said, yeah, that's not what I'm asking. So later on in our conversations yesterday afternoon, she said, yeah, I just don't, and I feel like a bit of an island here. I was like, right. But when interestingly enough, because I had had sideline conversations or individual conversations with a lot of her peers and her partners, and they said, well, I know how she shows up, but we all know that's not really the way she feels. And so you never know, you can never get a read on whether she's telling you the truth or she's just saying what you want to hear. And I thought that was quite a profound sense of nobody's got my back because there's a trust and authenticity issue. The last one is, I find it physically exhausting, heavy, and really a physical sense, right? Now, don't get me wrong. Everybody has days at work. When I was in the restaurant business, I remember specifically a day where I phoned my business partner and I said, let's burn them down. Let's just burn them down and take the insurance money. Ironically, she said, could we? Should we? I was like, oh, wait, that's not the response I was hoping for. You're supposed to be pushing back. But there's those days where you're like, wow, they're just a rough ride, right? There is always the roller coaster of being an advisor, right? Depending, especially when could be the market. It's nothing you're doing, you're fine. But there's things you have to react to. But there's, when people start to say like, oh, just the weight of my career and my job and all of that, it shouldn't be weighty, right? It should be a joy still to go to work to serve people. And if it feels like a heavy weight that's almost physical, it's so emotional like physical, it's an indicator that there's, again, an opportunity for you to change things. Now, when you find that authentic thing, it's not like it clicks over Monday morning and you go, I found the new me! I will tell you a funny story. My brother had a company and we used to share office space. So we just had a joint kitchen. So I'd come from my office, he'd come from his office, and we'd meet in the kitchen. So one day he comes in, it's a Friday morning, and I'm dressed similar to this, and he is wearing a Hawaiian shirt. What's with the Hawaiian shirt, Jay? Oh yeah, it's Crazy Hawaiian Friday shirt day. I was like, oh yeah? Yeah, everybody's doing it. We're all wearing Hawaiian shirts. And I think, I didn't see anybody else wearing a Hawaiian shirt. So as we're stirring our coffees, I look back into his office, and I'm doing this. I don't see anybody else wearing a Hawaiian shirt. And I said, is it just me, or are you the only guy with a Hawaiian shirt? And he said, oh yeah, it'll take a minute to catch on, but it's going to roll. And he walked out with his coffee, and away he went. And I, like anybody, thought, what a lunatic. Crazy Hawaiian shirt day is the only one wearing Hawaiian. But next Friday, there's another guy. Week after that, third guy came and was like, hey, went and bought my shirt. I got a better Hawaiian shirt than you guys. Well, the second there was 2 and 3 of them, that turnover of, by the time there was 3, the following week there was 7. And then everybody had one. Then there was one guy that one week, about week 5 or 6, the only guy who wasn't wearing his Hawaiian shirt. And now everybody was like, come on, James, what's that? Where? And now all of a sudden he's an outlier. I'm sorry, I'll get the shirt. But I say that because this idea of finding authentic, just like Patty Lund or my brother, people are going to tell you you're crazy and that's a silly way to operate. But if it resonates with you, it's going to resonate with other people. And people like somebody who's wearing a Hawaiian shirt on a Friday and owns it, right? Who doesn't want to invest or buy some insurance from that guy? I would. Has anybody ever had a bad boss? When I was in I sold my first software company and I went to work for some guys. And one of the partners was one of those guys who always had the story he thought he was supposed to tell. This is where we're going. These are our goals. We're all about team here. And everybody went, yeah, uh-huh. And at the end of it, he would leave and everybody yeah, that was a waste of time, yep. And none of us believed a word of it because we knew how he operated the rest of the time. He'd talk about, hey, we're all a team. But he actually, for the other 364 days a year, was always looking for, whose fault is this? And liked to scapegoat people. there was always some element of what he said sort of from, the state of the business, the big speech, to the way he operated every day. It didn't necessarily fit. So I say this because when you think about if you've got a team, whether it be one person or 5 people or 10 people or however that is, or if you run a dealership office, right? The way you show up, and when you think of great leaders, it's belief, commitment, and authenticity are words that really resonate. When they have had great speeches, they believe it. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't have, "I have a dream." Well, I'm sort of buying into it, right? There's a belief level there. And I say that because when you are authentic and you're excited about the new DI product that's come out, or you're excited about, I don't know, a new mutual fund that you guys now have access to, or some product, or you're excited about, hey, we've just got this deal and we have access to all of these employees and we can help all these people, that it fires everybody up. They recognize your authenticity in that messaging, even though it's doing business and sales and things like that, but they get fired up. And when you share that stuff with them, it really has an impact. It creates some element of team. The thing I love too is that so often from a leader perspective, and even from an advisor perspective, you feel like, well, I've always got to have the right answer. Sometimes my favorite answer is when somebody said, I got to be honest, I don't really know, but let me get back to you. I had a business that was, I'd taken over. I came in as the interim CEO of a publicly traded company in 2010. And at some point, we were bleeding staff, bleeding cash. The previous quarter before I started, we lost $993,000 in a quarter. And so at some point, some of the managers came to me with some questions. And I really had to say, I got to be honest, guys, I don't have all the answers. We're working through this stuff, but I don't have a master plan yet. And one of them, as they left, stuck his head back in the door and said, hey, by the way, I really appreciate you just being honest about that. I'm on board. I'm not going anywhere. And I thought, oh, but that authenticity and my recognition, I'm striving here. I don't have it. I'm working on it. I'm a work in progress, even as the CEO, had a profound effect, and it allowed me to keep some of the key people, but also for them to start to recruit and find more people that started to drink the same Kool-Aid we did. So I say this because the way you show up with your team, again, even if it's just an assistant, is really, really profound when you are authentic and you can be vulnerable and you can be straightforward. When you do think about your team, I always think it's interesting because as soon as you add another person, the team dynamic changes, right? If it's just you operating as an independent advisor, and then all of a sudden you partner up with somebody, the dynamic has completely changed. You add a third person, it changes again, much like this crew of people, right? Every one of them is such a big personality and different. It's a total different thing when you get a group like that instead of one person. So knowing that authenticity changes as your group grows or as your company team grows, I say add people carefully, right? Really make sure and spend the time. I say to people, check authenticity, and they say, well, how do you do that? Well, here's how you don't do it. You don't give somebody a 30-minute interview and say you start on Monday. I was in a facilitation with a law firm and all of their partners yesterday morning, and we were talking about this idea of adding people. And they said, oh, well, that's not a concern with us because it normally takes us 2 to 5 years to hire somebody. And I thought that was a punchline. I was like, yeah, no, really. They said, no, seriously. We hire people so slow. We tell people, you're going to come over, you're going to socialize with us, we're going to do some work where we can. We're going to sort of recruit and get to know you for 2 to 5 years. One guy, Alex, was like, it was only a year for me because I'm super. I was like, right, okay, Alex. But I loved it. They said, you really can't know a person with an interview. The other thing I love to do is when the last time I hired somebody who was going to work closely with my assistant, I said to her, yeah, before you meet with me again, you're going to have an interview with my mom, my business partner. She also will interview you. She was like, why am I meeting with your mother? I go, well, because as a woman, I believe she has a radar for things and an intuitiveness that I don't necessarily have. I interview you all from here. And so I said, none of that. I want perspective. The only way I can check authenticity is if I put you through a whole bunch of stuff. If I get you to show up for a week and spend some time with us. In the restaurant business, we'd say to people, we're going to pay you for a week, come join us for 1 week. And if that goes well, then we'll make you an offer of employment. Because what we found is people can lie on the first shift, but by day 6 and 7, they've forgotten the things they told you in the interview and the real them shows up. And it'd be like, I thought you said you weren't a yeller. Do you remember you saying that in the interview? Because I was watching you scream at the guys in the back, and it seems like you're a yeller. Well, I'm a little bit of a yeller. Yeah, Sorry, we don't accept yellers here. So I say it, add people carefully, check their authenticity. And I love this idea of align their values. One of the best things, everybody's probably done personality assessments or different types of profiling. I love to ask people and do this assessment on what are your values? Because if my value is quality and it ranks really, really high, or a level of excellence in completing tasks, or efficiency, which it is, I like to get things done, did it. And somebody else's values are the opposite, and now your attitude is, well, my value is good enough. Well, that clashes pretty dramatically with mine of excellence. And so I'm a big fan now when we add people authentically that values and even interests play a really big role. And I have, in my first 20 years of owning companies, I never thought about the values my team had. Because when they showed up, they were going to learn our culture and take on our values, and it doesn't work like that. I now realize all of them influence those things. I love this idea that, according to Google, that the determining factor why top teams succeed all has to do with authenticity, trust, respect, all of those things. So I will tell you again that in order for you to perform in your business, or to perform from a sales perspective, from a leadership perspective in your office, to perform even as a trusted advisor and sage with your customers, it demands authenticity. You will stand out every day that you show up a little bit more like you. Now, I know oftentimes what happens is as we start to work through exercises, we say to people like, why don't you do this? And they say, oh yeah, I don't really get that. It's not really me. Or they say, I can't do that. Now, I'm just not comfortable stepping that far out of my comfort zone, which is, handling the brochure. Or they say, well, I don't think that would work for me. And I love the idea that if the power of this word, yet. Well, I don't get that yet, but I'll keep striving. I can't do that yet. And that doesn't work for me yet. Because the power of you taking away from this conference all of the ideas you've got over the last 3 days is taking all those things and actually putting it into practice. But recognizing that while none of those things are maybe existing in your business, or there's all those opportunities you haven't started right now at this moment, that, well, you haven't done it yet, right? As you go back to work this week or maybe on Monday, you have the ability to implement all of those new things. But pick the ones that resonate and are authentic with you, and your success will be astronomically better in 2018 and into the rest of your career. Thank you.